Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing abrupt climate change, climate breakdown. Many things are going on. I would try to say that I'm going to be diligent and do more videos, but I don't know if I can promise anything like that. So I just have to kind of plow through the things that I really want to read. I really wanted to read this political article today, and I'm going to try and do that. But first, I just wanted to briefly talk on some other things that are happening. I'm going to link this video. Anybody familiar with Mr. Is it BBB33 or something like that? I've posted his videos before. He has a video showing a temperature anomaly in the Gulf of Mexico. There's a point in the Gulf of Mexico that's at 130, around 130 degrees, which is wild. A lot of the Gulf is, at least over the water, is near the 80-degree mark, which is pretty dang warm. I don't know if that's warm for February or not, but anyways, I'll link this video. You guys can check it out. It's interesting and scary. Very quickly, the last white rhino is deteriorating in health, so this species is about to go away, among many other other species. Y'all can just Google that. There are many articles about it if you want to check it out. It's kind of like came across my Twitter feed. Also very important, if you all didn't catch, I think this is a fairly big news story, Putin claiming that he has new weapons, new nuclear capable missiles that are capable of penetrating our defenses. And he delivered a very scary speech, basically saying, you should be afraid of us. Pretty wild stuff, considering the posturing being done by Trump in the world. Putin is about to be reelected again. I don't know how many terms this is now that he's served, but he's going to be reelected probably to another 6-year term. Xi Jinping from China is, I think, cleared for becoming president in perpetuity. So they don't need any more elections to, I don't know how real their elections were in the first place, but they're doing away with any pretense at democracy. Interesting times, very interesting times. Interesting stuff that Putin said too in his speech about the fact that we did not listen to them, we did not negotiate with them, and this, frankly, is our fault. This is what we get for not negotiating with Gorbachev way back in the 80s. He was willing to start destroying his nuclear arsenal if we destroyed ours. And we said, no, we'd rather ramp up the arms race. All the way through George Bush pulling out of a nuclear treaty that we had with Russia, Obama ramping up the revitalization of the nuclear arsenal, and then Trump is just carrying on. So it's just a succession of neoliberal or neocon, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, ideas, absolutely controlling our government and ultimately the minds of the people, because now everybody's like, oh my God, Russia is such a threat. Oh my God, Putin is so crazy. Oh my God. No, strike that, reverse that. We are the aggressor. That's why, That's why these other countries are doing what they're doing, because they're very afraid of us. And that's not a good thing. Not a good thing for the state of the world. And so I'm going to read this political article. If I have time, I will go back to some climate change news, but I just thought this was a great article and I wanted to share it with you. Titled Gaslighting, State Mind Control and Abusive Narcissism. This is from May 26th, 2016. Exceptionalism. Oh, this is by Vanessa Beeley. Exceptionalism, the condition of being different from the norm. Also, a theory expounding the exceptionalism, especially of a nation or region. There are many theories surrounding the origin of American exceptionalism, the most popular in U.S. folklore being that it describes America's unique character as a free nation founded on democratic ideals and civil liberties. Excuse me. Let's try that again. The Declaration of Independence from British colonial rule is the foundation of this theory and has persevered throughout the often violent history of the U.S. since its birth as a free nation. Over time, exceptionalism has come to represent superiority in the minds and hearts of Americans. Belief in their economic, military, and ideological supremacy is what has motivated successive U.S. governments to invest in shaping the world in their superior image with little or no regard for the destruction left in the wake of their exceptional hegemony. In considering itself exceptional, the U.S. has extricated itself from any legal obligation to adhere to either international law or even the common moral laws that should govern humanity. The U.S. has become exceptionally lawless and authoritarian, particularly in its intolerant neo-colonialist foreign policy. The colonized have become the colonialists, concealing their brutal savagery behind the veneer of missionary zeal that they are converting the world to their form of exceptionalist utopia. Such is the media and marketing apparatus that supports the superiority complex. The majority of U.S. Congress exist within its own echo chamber and are willing victims of its indoctrination. The power of the propaganda vortex pulls them in and then radiates outward, infecting all in its path. Self-extraction from this oligarchical perspective is perceived as a revolutionary act that challenges the core of U.S. security, so exceptionalism becomes the modus vivendi. Just as Israel considers itself the chosen people from a religious perspective, the U.S. considers itself the chosen nation to impose its version of democratic reform and capitalist hegemony the world over. One can see why Israel and the U.S. make such symbiotic bedfellows. The fatal war for humanity is the war with Russia and China, towards which Washington is driving the U.S. and Washington's NATO and Asian puppet states. The bigotry of the U.S. power elite is rooted in its self-righteous doctrine that stipulates America as the indispensable country. This is a quote from Paul Craig Roberts. Washington drives the world towards war. So why do the American people accept U.S. criminal hegemony, domestic and foreign brutal tyranny, and neo-colonialist bloodletting with scant protest? Why do the European vassal states not rise up against this authoritarian regime that flaunts international law and drags its NATO allies down the path to complete lawlessness and diplomatic ignominy? What is gaslighting? The psychological term gaslighting comes from the 1944 Hollywood classic movie called Gaslight. Gaslighting describes the abuse employed by a narcissist to instill in their victim's mind an extreme anxiety and confusion to the extent where they no longer have faith in their own powers of logic, reason, and judgment. These gaslighting techniques were adopted by Central Intelligence agencies in the US and Europe as part of their psychological warfare methods used primarily during torture or interrogation. Gaslighting is an abuser's modus operandi, involves specifically the withholding of factual information and its replacement with false or fictional information designed to confuse and disorientate. The subtle and Machiavellian process eventually undermines the mental stability of its victims, reducing them to such a depth of insecurity and identity crisis that they become entirely dependent upon their abuser for their sense of reality and even identity. Gaslighting involves a step-by-step psychological process to manipulate and destabilize its victim. It is built up over time and consists of repetitive information feeds that enter the victim's subconscious over a period of time until it is fully registered on the subconscious hard disk and cannot be overridden by the conscious floppy disk. Put more simply, it is brainwashing. Overall, the main reason for gaslighting is to create a dynamic where the abuser has complete control over the victim so that they are so weak that they are very easy to manipulate. Alex Miles. 3 stages of gaslighting. Stage 1. The first stage depends upon trust in the integrity and unimpeachable intentions of the abuser, a state of reliance that has been engendered by the abuser's artful self-promotion and ingratiating propaganda. Once this trust is gained, an abuser will begin to subtly undermine it, creating situations and environments where the victim will begin to doubt their own judgment. Eventually, the victim will rely entirely upon the abuser to alleviate their uncertainty and to restore their sense of reality, which is in fact that of the abuser. Stage 2, the second stage, defense, is a process by which the abuser isolates the victim not only from their own sense of identity, but from the validation of their peers. They are made to feel that their opinion is worthless, discredited, downright weird. In political circles, that would be labeled a conspiracy theorist, a dissident, a terror apologist. As a consequence, the victim will withdraw from society and cease to express themselves for fear of ridicule, judgment, or punishment. This is absolutely the crux of what is going on in this country. The stage can also be compared to Stockholm syndrome, where a hostage or captive is reduced by psychological mind games back to infantile dependency upon their captor. Narcissistic abuse bonds the victim to the aggressor via trauma bonds. Stockholm syndrome bonds the victim to the aggressor via regression to an infantile state where the abuser-aggressor becomes the parent who will rescue the victim from imminent annihilation. Both methods tap into the victim's survival mechanisms to gain and maintain control. Stage 3, the final stage is depression. A life under the tyrannical rule of a narcissist drives the victim into a state of extreme confusion. They are stripped of dignity and self-reliance. They ultimately exist in an information vacuum which is only filled by that which the abuser deems suitable or relevant. This can eventually invoke symptoms of PTSD, flashbacks, constant apprehension, hypervigilance, mind paralysis, rage, and even violence. The process is complete, and the victim has been reduced to a willing accomplice in the abuser's creation of a very distorted reality. Excuse me. We are currently seeing the transformation of U.S. exceptionalism into an abusive narcissism. It's already transformed. It's not transforming. It's already there. The gargantuan apparatus of mind bending and controlling is being put into hyperdrive by the ruling elite. We are inundated by propaganda that challenges our sense of reality, but only after being tenderized by the fear factor. Fear of terror, fear of war, fear of financial insecurity, fear of gun violence, fear of our own shadow. Once we are suitably quaking in our boots, in comes a rendition of reality that relieves our anxiety. If we challenge this version of events, we are labeled a conspiracy theorist, a threat to security. We are hounded, discredited, slandered, and ridiculed. We are isolated and threatened. Wars are started in the same way. Despite the hindsight that should enable us to see it coming, excuse me, the process swings into motion with resounding success. The ubiquitous dictator, the oligarch who threatens to destroy all that the U.S. and her allies represent, which of course is freedom, equality, and civil liberty, all wrapped up in the democracy shiny paper and tied with the exceptionalist ribbon. Next, the false flag to engender fear, terror, and foment sectarian strife. I wonder which one they're talking about. The support of a legitimate, organic, indigenous revolution conveniently emerging in tandem with U.S. ambitions for imposing their model of governance upon a target nation. The arming of freedom fighters, the securing of mercenary additions to these manufactured proxy forces, all this is sold in the name of freedom and democracy to a public that is already in a state of anxiety and insecurity, lacking in judgment or insight into any other reality but that of their abuser. The NGO complex deployment. Finally, the humanitarians are deployed. The forces for good, the vanguard of integrity and ethical intervention, the power that offers all lost souls a stakeholding in the salvation of sovereign nations that have lost their way and need rescuing. A balm for a damaged soul to know that they can leave their doubts and fears in such trustworthy hands as HRW, Amnesty International. They can assuage their deep sense of guilt at the suffering being endured by the people of far-flung nations because they can depend upon the NGOs to provide absolution with minimal effort on their part. They don't realize that NGOs are an integral part of the abuser's apparatus, operating on the leash of neo-colonialist financing and influence. NGOs provide the optic through which the abuser will allow the victim to perceive their world, and once absorbed into this flawed prism, the victim's own cognitive dissonance will ensure they do not attempt a jailbreak. In the state of oppressed consciousness, the victim accepts what they are told. They accept that the U.S. can sell cluster bombs to Saudi Arabia that obliterate human beings and lay waste to essential civilian infrastructure in Yemen. They accept that the U.S. financially, ideologically, and militarily supports the illegal state of Israel and provides the arsenal of experimental weapons that maim and mutilate children and civilians on a scale that is unimaginable. They accept that a crippling blockade of already impoverished and starving nation of Yemen is necessary to resolve the issues of sectarian divisions that only exist in the minds of their congressional abusers. The majority of Americans accept mass murder under the pretext of the right to protect, because their ability to form rational and reasoned opinions has been engineered out of them. This is now the definition of U.S. exceptionalism. It is their ability to manipulate the world into accepting their lawlessness and global hegemony agenda. In seeking to impose its own image upon our world, the U.S. has drifted so far from its founding principles, one wonders how they will ever return to them. They have employed a recognized form of torture to ensure capitulation to the mission of world domination, which entails the mental, physical, and spiritual torture of target civilian populations. In conclusion, the U.S. has indeed achieved exceptionalism. The U.S. has become an exceptional global executioner and persecutor of humanity. Imperialism is a euphemism for the depths of abuse the U.S. is inflicting upon people of this world. Our only hope is to break the cycle of abuse with empathy for the victim and with appreciation for the years of brainwashing that precedes their agonizing passive-aggressive apathy towards crimes being committed in their name. This was an email I received recently from one courageous young American girl whose epiphany is testament to the resilience and survival instinct of the human spirit. Quote, "My name is Caroline, and I am a 22-year-old U.S. citizen. I only fairly recently discovered the truth about the Empire/NATO's activities in Syria and Libya and so many other countries, thanks to writers like Andrei Vichik, Cory Morningstar, and Forrest Palmer. I am sickened when I remember that I signed some of those Abbas petitions, and I feel horrified at knowing that I have Syrian and Libyan blood on my hands. I want to believe that I'm not really guilty because I really thought, as I had been told, that I was not doing something bad at the time. But still, what I did contribute to the suffering of those people, and I want to do something to atone, at least in some small way, even though I probably can't make up for what I did or erase my crime. If it's not too much trouble, could you please tell me what you think I should do, if there is anything? She deserves an answer." I rather like that article. I hope that you did too. I have another political article. I'm not going to read it today. This is from Caitlin Johnson. I'm going to read it on another day. But kind of segueing into the whole Russia scare, and let's, go to war with Russia. The war drums are beating, and it ain't just the Trumpers that are beating them. All right, I'm going to go to well, we've got lots of Arctic warming news. It seems to be daily, which is good. Which is good. This should be the first news story on every news program every single day, leading off the hour. The Arctic is melting in the middle of winter. Dahr, Jamail. This is from February 27th. Cape Town is about to run out of water because of climate disruption, but some are hoping to profit from it. In Cape Town, South Africa, a city of 4 million people, water rationing has been ongoing for months. Predictions of when the city will run completely out of water, referred to as Day Zero, have pegged the date somewhere between mid-April to mid-May, though they've been recently extended to July 9 due to decrease in water usage. Barring unforeseen heavy rains to quell the crisis, Cape Town could soon become a case study in how a major city reacted to anthropogenic climate disruption driven drought. 3 years straight of unprecedented drought have left the city with meager water in its primary reservoirs, leaving it in a position to possibly become the first major city in the world to literally run out of water. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change Fifth Assessment Report warned that long-term climate models indicate that a significant drying trend will continue across portions of Western South Africa, with annual rainfall being reduced by up to 40%. Hence, Cape Town's drought has been linked directly to ACD. City officials have already announced that once the water capacity of the dams reaches 13.5%, water will be shut off for all except essential services like hospitals and schools. Once taps are turned off for most, people will have to go to 200 municipal points to collect their 25 liters per day under the watch of armed guards. Meanwhile, the city may have bought itself a little more time by limiting water for agriculture, much to the chagrin of farmers. Ibrahim Fourie is with the Cape Town Housing Assembly, an independent community-based organization that fights against the neoliberal policies of the city and national government's work to implement. He described how the water rationing is impacting the poor and working class far more severely than the upper class, of course. Fourie explained that a working class household has 15 people on average, which includes extended family and backyarders, people living literally in the backyards of residences. The city is only allowing 25 liters per person each day. While middle class and wealthy people can purchase bottled water to supplement these rations, lower income people are left with an inadequate supply. The daily limit has very little to do with people's real water needs, and has even less to do with the extra needs of the very young, the old, the sick, or the unemployed who are at home most of the day, Fourie told Truth Out. Many backyard shacks have burned to the ground, where mostly children lost their lives due to limited access to water. According to Fourie, who has been a water campaigner for 4 years, the crisis is already so severe that for the working class that elderly people often don't even have enough water to take their medications. People are struggling to live with dignity as we are teaching our children not to wash their hands and we don't flush the toilets, he explained. This is a daily threat on our health, many suffering from diarrhea, skin diseases, etc. The poor cannot afford to buy water from the shelves of retailers. Residents of the city are being impacted psychologically as well. Maurice Barak, self-employed leadership and executive coach, explained that her feelings about the crisis range from denial to anxiety to outright fear and sadness. My sadness is that the data about the relentless climate shift and its implications have been known for a long time, she told Truth Out. I hear stories that the government was meant to have built dams but did not, that the province had money but used it for more immediate necessities, housing, etc. While she can understand the difficulties of arguing for a long-term view when faced with increasing unhoused population, Barak added that she thinks that political agendas have been more powerful than the willingness to care for the region and its people. It is exactly this old top-down hierarchical power over model of governments that the water crisis is highlighting. Fourie and Barak are both working to assist the poor in the immediate term, and also to bring awareness to the need for community and a completely different paradigm. However the water crisis unfolds, the disparity between these two models, the top-down framework and the community-based vision, will be made all the more clear. In the meantime, massive numbers of people are already struggling each day in Cape Town just to get their basic needs met. Rich versus working class. Faure explained that Cape Town's water crisis isn't new. When it comes to low-income people, the working class has been feeling its effects since 2008. Faure has seen the city of Cape Town installing water meters in people's homes, portraying the installations as part of an effort to help people manage their own water use. Hence, the city called the water meters water management devices. In reality, the installations have been part of a long-term project aimed at privatizing the water. Up until the current crisis, the city was doing well, quote unquote, in this effort toward privatization, according to Faure, meaning that their efforts to privatize more of the water were coming along well. But that has changed dramatically now. Day zero and the immediate punitive financial measures taken by the city have led to an uproar of many residents of Cape Town who formed groups and protested the scare tactics by the city as another attempt to privatize water, Faure explained. This pressure from below, largely coming from citizens groups self-organizing themselves and working together, has given rise to participatory processes between the national government, provincial government, and civil society. But while the process is portrayed as consultation, Faure explained that many believe it is yet another attempt to privatize the water, as there are lucrative tenders waiting in the wings, he said. Activists have set up the Cape Town Water Crisis Coalition aimed at preventing the privatization of water. Meanwhile, Faure hasn't seen anything of import being done by the government to help the poor during the water crisis, other than the city instructing them to install prepaid water meters, which everyone else already opposes, as they are seeing the privatization writing on the wall. The city is asking people to save water, which they do not have, Faure said, in addition to the fact that people are already having to pay more for water. Another problem stems from the fact that Cape Town is sharing water information via social media, ignoring the fact that many poor people lack internet access. Barack is seeing these elements brought to the fore by the crisis as well. It seems to me the political differences between the province, Democratic Alliance, and the government, African National Congress, has a lot to do with the inability to move rapidly on the growing danger of the water crisis. There has been an appalling lack of information about strategies going forward. It seems that the powers that have been moving incredibly slowly toward acknowledging the size of the challenge and its ramifications on the population, agriculture, and other businesses. Like Faure, she is deeply disturbed by how Cape Town's poorest are bearing the brunt of the crisis. Barack explained how many poor people already lack running water in their homes and have to get their water from communal taps. Thus, they are already using the least amount of water of any group. Given how many industries are impacted by the water shortage, the crisis is causing a loss of jobs, which particularly impacts working class and poor people, according to Barack. The impact of this is on the many people dependent on work to sustain their lives is unimaginable, she said. More disparity. Barack and Faure are appalled by the huge visible disparity between how the rich are able to deal with the crisis versus the suffering and exploitation of the poor. Many of the rich own water bottling companies. They can afford to buy water, Faure said. The available groundwater springs are usually in affluent areas, which make them easy to access, and with current water restrictions, the rich have cars to load their water. Not only are many working class people unable to afford to buy water, they often do not have cars to transport water from afar. This is further complicated by the fact that most of the working class in Cape Town, like most major cities, live on the outskirts of the city. The disparity goes beyond purchasing bottled water. Barack noted having money seems to support the denial and the ease with which people could pay their water fines and carry on using as much water as they wanted. She explained that having money also means that you have can have a borehole dug into the ground in order to access your own water, something a working class person would be hard pressed to afford. Money means that you can also outfit your home to save all the gray water and reuse it, and in some cases get right off the water grid, she added. Money allows people to buy the new technology, water from air machines. These machines are essentially atmospheric water generators equipped with the technology necessary to capture, convert, and regulate water from air. which is totally awesome until like millions of people are trying to use these water from air machines. Then what happens to the humidity, the natural humidity of the air, right? So it's another like major impact we're going to have if people start using these machines en masse, right? The actual air won't have much humidity in it because we'll be trying to suck all the water out of it. In addition, having money means you can simply move to another city or out of the country for as long as you need to. It also means you can purchase paper plates, cups, and hand sanitizer rather than having to use water to wash dishes and hands. Fori has seen a water crisis impacting the Cape Town poor for years now, as informal water settlements imposed upon them by the city have been causing many people to have to walk long distances and stand in lines for water. Evolve or suffer the consequences. Fori said the most difficult thing for him about the crisis is watching the daily suffering of our peoples. Is it possible for a large number of people to switch gears? He's angered by how the neoliberal form of privatization individualizes our struggles. Everyone has similar struggles, but it's struggling in their own corners. Is frustrated by the lies he hears Cape Town's politicians telling people, coupled with how easily people are believing them due to the desperate nature of the crisis. Is it possible for large numbers of people to switch gears, refuse to believe the lies, and take collective action instead? Barak points to the possibility of the community moving together toward a solution. It feels to me as if we are inexorably moving toward a tsunami-like experience with many unexpected and intense, possibly dire consequences, she said. But where there is adequate factual information accessible to all, where there is the invitation to connect and explore what we can do together and overcome the fear of the historical divisions in our city, then there is possibility. Both Barak and her husband have become amazed by how little water they use every day and how easy it is to do so. Once the habit of being conscious of every drop set in, it became easy for them to save, to reuse, and to feel pretty good about what can be done. There are so many conversations that happen spontaneously between strangers to exchange ideas on what else one can do to save water and deal with the impact of, for instance, not flushing the toilet, she explained. In some ways, people are acknowledging that we are together in this and how can we support each other. Unlike a hurricane, earthquake, or other natural disaster, the crisis in Cape Town, unfolding over months, has provided people time to face it and strategize. Because of this, Barak is trusting that the people collectively can engage in ways that will bring them all closer together. Cape Town is one of the most divided cities in South Africa, she added. This could be an opportunity for positive change, or not. Fori hopes that the water crisis is seen for the other kind of crisis the government has turned it into, a crisis of capitalism, a crisis of the rich seeking to profit from those being impacted the most severely by the lack of water. People are raising the question of, if it's a crisis, why? And why are soft drink companies and South African breweries not forced to cut down on production? He asked. Day zero is a straight-out attack on the working class to push privatization and desalination, an expensive process by which salt is removed from seawater so that it is potable. Barak speaks of how she is watching a micro-example unfold across her city of what is befalling the planet. It is sad to see beautiful parts of Cape Town become arid and sandy, but that is a loss of what we created, she said. The earth is fine. It will rebalance in its own time. But if we want to live on it, then a completely different relationship is demanded. I am awakening to this fact as the reality hits. Indeed, reality hitting. Reality's hitting pretty good. That's all I have for tonight. Thank you so much for your eyes and your ears and your conscience. You know, somebody sent me that article and I don't remember who, and I apologize, but thank you, whoever sent that article to me. I appreciate you. The gaslighting article, not the Dahr Jamail one. I saw that and Truth Out myself. If you would like to donate to this channel, there are links below, which you can utilize. Thank you all for the donations, the kind and generous donations I have received this week. I appreciate you so very much. It really, really helps. Until next time, peace.